Hi there and welcome back to my channel. My name is Aaron Day and today I'm going over the top 5 mistakes that people make when they bring back carbohydrates after being keto. So let's get into it. So you may have been someone who has done keto for a little while, or maybe you've done low carb and you've lost a fair bit of weight. Fantastic. You're gaining your health back, which is really good. You're maintaining normal blood sugar levels, which is fantastic. You're feeling really good. You're feeling really confident. And maybe you go out one night and you've had some carbohydrates. Actually, who can go out these days? But you've gone and had some carbohydrates and you've gained weight. What on earth is going wrong? Why is that the case? And what can we do to prevent those from happening? So the reason why you've gained weight, if you've consumed carbohydrates, if you've been low carb for a long time, is that you've effectively reduced your body's glycogen levels. And so by adding carbohydrates, so glycogen is your stored carbohydrate in your muscles and in your liver, when you eat carbohydrates, you will also store water with that glycogen. It's a very inefficient way of your body storing energy, but basically when you store glycogen, you also have to store water with that. That's why we have a smaller tank of glycogen compared to our fat storage. But when that happens, you gain some of that water weight back. So when you initially go keto and you have that first week or two where you lose, 2-3 kilos, right? And you think, wow, that's fantastic. Keto is really working. You're actually dropping just your water weight, and maybe some of that is fat, but the more consistent you are with that over the long term will kind of dictate whether you're actually losing fat or not. So by adding some of those carbohydrates back, you've effectively gained a little bit of that water weight. It's not fat. You're not back to where you were previously. You've just gained a little bit of weight there. And if you were consistent with the amount of carbohydrates that you eat, then you wouldn't see that fluctuation. But the first mistake that I see so many people when they have been keto, or if they've been low carb for a while, maybe they've been able to get to their goal weight, which is awesome. Maybe you've got very close and you're ready to do another fat loss phase down the track, but you've eaten carbs and you've jumped straight to bread and pasta and cheesecake and cheeseburgers, right? A lot of the refined carbohydrates, you've jumped straight from those because maybe you feel guilty and you have to eat them in secret, or maybe they were just the only thing in your resistance has just kind of caved. You've resisted those foods for so long, and now you've just brought them back and they've come back in a vengeance, right? So that's one of the mistakes that I see so many people make, is they jump straight to refined carbohydrates. But if you are someone who has been low carb for a while, what works better is increasing the amount of vegetables that you have and adding some fruits back and seeing how you go with that, seeing how your body responds. By doing so, you're increasing maybe green leafy vegetables, you're increasing cruciferous vegetables, you're increasing maybe some of those starchy vegetables, so you can think of potato or sweet potato or corn or peas, those types of foods. And maybe you're adding in some fruit here and there, and see how your body responds. That is going to be so much better than jumping straight from low carb and being really scared of carbohydrates straight up to refined carbs that we probably wanted to avoid in the first place. So that jump happens a lot. So don't feel like you've messed up. Just get back into keto and make those small jumps with carbohydrates first and see how your body responds. Mistake number 2. So a lot of the times when we're fearful of carbohydrates, or maybe we just haven't had so much of them, and we have some carbohydrates and we jump on the scales the next day and our weight goes up, and we jump on the scales the next day and our weight goes up again, your body is just regaining its sort of equilibrium, right? You're adding some of that carbohydrate back into your glycogen storage and some of that water weight, and your body's kind of leveling out. But what happens is that you get fearful and you drop back really low carb again straight afterwards. And then your body's kind of in this period where you're not incorporating enough, but you're also going back. And so you just get this inherent fear that carbohydrates cause weight gain. But if you eat a consistent amount of carbohydrates over time, your body will naturally find its set point, and that will be your new, place that you get really healthy from, right? So it doesn't mean that you can get ultimately lower with keto. You can get really low with carbohydrates too. It's just you have to be consistent with that. So whatever you choose, if you're bringing carbohydrates back, it's best to have a consistent amount of carbohydrates, whether that's across the span of a day, across the span of a week, across the span of a month, and that is going to level the playing field. So don't be scared when you add carbohydrates and the weight goes up. Don't be scared and try and pull it back down. That's just your new set point, right? So I hope that helps. Mistake number 3 is that a lot of people, what happens when they bring back carbohydrates is they bring back the foods that are have a lot of fat, have a lot of carbohydrates, and don't have a lot of protein. So you need to still eat adequate protein when you're bringing back carbohydrates into your diet. So what that means is that eating anywhere between 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of weight, or for people who use the imperial system, maybe that's about a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Anywhere in there is a really good, and it's a bit of a sliding scale too, but you just have to make sure that you're still eating adequate protein. So when you're making that transition, whether you've gone from losing weight and you're rebuilding your metabolism and you're adding carbohydrates back in, or if you're doing a transition where maybe you're adding carbs back in and you're taking some of those fats out, you still need to be eating adequate protein. So that is one of the biggest mistakes I see so many people do. They add carbs back, the protein goes down, and then their diet sort of falls off the bandwagon. So don't make that mistake. Tip number 4. So a lot of times what happens is that when people bring back carbohydrates, they're still kind of doing kind of carbs and kind of keto, right? They might still be eating those fattier cuts of meat, and they might still be adding root vegetables. They might still be having fat bombs, or they might still be having that bulletproof coffee in the morning and trying to add carbohydrates at the same time. And what ends up happening is that they end up losing out on a lot of omega-3s that they could have added into their fat intake, as opposed to consuming so much of that fat intake from saturated fats. Not that saturated fats are bad, but if you have all of your fat intake from saturated fats and you're not making enough room for omega-3s, there could be a problem long term. And I think that there's a great way to add omega-3s back into your diet, especially if you're adding carbohydrates back in. So just make sure that you are eating plenty of salmon or eating plenty of fish, making sure that you are getting those omega-3 sources from particular foods that are enjoyable to you. That is one of the mistakes I see so many people, is that they still have a really high saturated fat diet when they move back to carbohydrates and not optimizing for omega-3. So watch out for that mistake. And mistake number 5 is when you are bringing back carbohydrates, a lot of people make the mistake and keep the fat really high. So we've gone keto, we've eliminated the fear of fat. We are no longer that fearful of that. We've incorporated a lot of recipes that include a lot of fat, or maybe we're incorporating a lot of fat throughout the day because fat's delicious, right? When we add carbohydrates back in, we need to make room for them somewhere. And so generally, if you are trying to maintain your weight, or maybe you're repairing your metabolism, then you are more than welcome to be able to add carbohydrates back in without altering too much. But at that stage, you're probably not eating a whole bunch of fat. You've probably gotten to the point where you've downregulated that a little bit. So doing it slowly over time is a good idea. And keeping the fat in the same ratio or percentage is a good idea. Now, another thing, what you could be doing is that maybe you're having a really hard time sticking with keto, and maybe you want to lose weight, but you're adding carbohydrates being back in, so you have to make a bit of a switch, right? And so instead of eating so much fat, you incorporate some carbohydrates instead of that fat, and you will have a much better time long term, because you will be able to continue that weight loss phase. You'll be able to get to that goal weight. You'll be able to transition that around so that you're not in this weird phase where you're kind of keto, kind of not, and then your body's just saying, hey, what's going on? Like, we can't do this all in the same meal or the same hour or the same day. We need some breaks. And that's where a little bit of metabolic flexibility comes in, where you are able to burn fat and you're able to burn carbohydrates, but your body's not very good at burning a lot of them both at the same time. So maybe separating those out in a structured way can really help. So I hope some of these mistakes have highlighted the fact that, maybe when you brought some carbohydrates back into your own diet, that you've made some of those mistakes as well. Let me know if you've made any of those mistakes in the comments below, because I certainly did. I probably made all of them. And only through trial and error and learning about nutrition was I able to rectify some of those issues, and now helping my clients do that as well has been super, super helpful. So if you loved this video, share it with someone who needs to get out of that carb phobia mind space and maybe stop making some of these same mistakes, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.